You're listening to Podketeers.
Welcome to episode 382 of Podketeers. This week we had the privilege of sitting down with local artist and curator of the exhibit Legend 200 Years of Sleepy Hollow. The talented Clark Silva joins us. He tells us about his career, how he got started, and what led him to curating this show and the process of doing so. It was a great talk, and we're thankful that we had some time to sit and chat with him. The exhibit is happening at the Museum and Cultural Center in Anaheim and will be running through Halloween, October 31st, 2021. The link to the museum website and Clark's Instagram account at Art of Clark Silva will be available in the blog post for this episode at podketeers.com/382. On top of that great chat with Clark, we also discuss Muppets Haunted Mansion. Remember that you can join the conversation on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Just search for Podketeers. But we'd love to invite you to join our growing community on Discord. Just like the links mentioned before, you can find an invite to join us in the blog post for this episode at podketeers.com/382. Steamboat Willie is raising money to help support the fight against women's cancers because almost anyone that you ask will tell you that cancer sucks. And as part of our fundraising effort, we released a limited edition golden pin with the Steamboat Willie logo on it. Only 100 of these special edition pins will be available for purchase, and once they sell out, we will not be making any more of this gold variant. How does the pin tie in? Well, we are donating $5 for every pin sold to City of Hope. As a matter of fact, this week between October 11th and October 15th, we're upping our donation amount to $6 per pin because one of the sponsors of the event is actually matching dollar for dollar. So we're trying to squeeze in a little bit more so that it turns out to be double the donation amount. So whether you, a friend, or a loved one has ever suffered from this horrible disease, you know the toll that it takes on them and their families. This is our way of trying to help put a stop to this horrible disease. But if pins aren't your thing, we totally get it. If you want to help out but just want to make a donation, you can head over to teamboatwillie.com for a link to make a donation. Or if you want to join our team and help raise money, that's awesome as well. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to help you out as best as we can. And of course, we can't get this thing started without taking a moment to thank the wonderful group of folks that make these episodes of Podketeers happen. Those people are the FGP Squad, our podcast Fairy Godparents, because it's their support via Patreon that help make all this possible. As part of the FGP Squad family, you get some additional perks like exclusive discounts for Podketeers gear, additional content on Patreon, and access to our monthly happy hour calls, just to name a few. For more information on how you can become part of the FGP Squad family, we invite you to check out podketeers.com/FGP. And as always, a super special thank you goes out to the FGP Squad for their continued support. So we're going to get this thing started. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. We hope you like what you hear and that you join us back for more. And for those of you that have been hanging with us for some time, we appreciate you. Thanks for being a part of the Podketeers family and hanging out with us on a weekly basis. So that's it. Time to get it started. So here is episode 382 of Podketeers. It is windy out in my area.
It's windy up here too. Like,
Is it really?
I think it must be windy everywhere. Yeah, I went to work today and we had a temporary shade structure put up just from COVID that never got taken down, and it was all blown apart. And so that was my morning, was cleaning up this blown down shade thing. So I think the whole state just must be blowing. I don't know what's going on.
Happy Wednesday.
Oh, nice.
Wednesday.
Love it.
It's
Love it.
like I had to bring it up.
Wednesday. In the 100-acre wood, a little bear named Winnie the Pooh.
I mean, it feels appropriate, right? Because for those that saw the title card of the episode, you know that a couple of weeks ago, or last week, sometime and within the last couple of episodes, we talked about how Mel and Larry visited the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Legend 200 Years of Sleepy Hollow exhibit at Museo, and it was curated by Clark Silva. Super talented local artist, and we had the pleasure of sitting down with Clark. So later in the episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the things that we've been excited about, because Muppets Haunted Mansion is out! We're going to talk about that. I'm so excited. I've seen it way too many times that I'm willing to admit it's a lot, y'all. But before we talk about that, we want to jump into this interview with Clark. Super fun talk about him, his career, how he put together this exhibit. And if you have an opportunity to go, definitely check it out. The details are going to be in the blog post for the episode, podketeers.com/382, if you want more info on that. So without further ado, here's our interview with Clark Silva.
Take it away, us.
All right, so we're super excited today because, as you remember, Melissa and Larry recently went to a show called Legend 200 Years of Sleepy Hollow. The curator of that art show was a talented artist, local artist named Clark Silva, and he's here with us today. Yay! Clark, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate that you're here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love your podcast. I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Love you too.
So before we get into the whole exhibit and telling us how you landed on that, I had the pleasure of meeting you several years ago through a mutual friend's art show. Our buddy Sam Carter was putting on these shows with Popzilla, and you were doing a piece for either Practically Perfect or Sith Happens, the Mary Poppins and Star Wars themed shows that he had put together in downtown Anaheim. And quite honestly, I was an instant fan. I loved your style, and I was just hooked.
Oh, thank you. I really kind of missed those shows. I know, I think that comic store has left with the pandemic shutdown and stuff. They didn't survive, but I miss kind of like those local art shows. And Sam's were always really fun, and I know that he supported a lot of like up and coming and local artists. So those were really fun to do.
Yeah, I mean, those shows are great. And Melissa and our friend Jill and I all met through these art walks that we were doing. And I had the opportunity to curate those. I helped run them for a handful of years. And man, the talent that comes through these is just amazing. All this untapped potential in many ways that when you have an opportunity to see what gets curated for these shows, your mind is blown. And that's how I was. I've always considered myself a groupie for these art shows. And so I always went. I love photography. I don't do so well on the drawing side. I used to draw a lot when I was a kid, but not so great at it now. So I tended to channel my photography skills into photographing the art, the artists, the events themselves. And, that's how I had fun. I remember heading out to... I don't remember which one came first. I know it was either Practically Perfect or Sith Happens. They were the same year, I believe. But they were super fun. And yeah, it is a shame that place isn't there anymore. Because it's in a prime spot right around the street from Museo, actually, where the exhibit is right now. Tell me a little bit about your career. I always love hearing an artist's journey from kind of what piqued them into wanting to draw, how they got into art, and what led them to doing something like curating a show like the one that you're running right now.
Well, I've always, through all of college, I was always and I was there for a while because I went back and forth between art and like history. I've always loved both of those things. Art, I stuck with and graduated from Cal State Fullerton with a BFA in illustration because I wanted to work at Disneyland in the art department. And so I worked there for a number of years doing these art shows on the side, but it never kind of happened with the art department there. I was able to kind of shadow them and like see like the cycle shop and like how they paint and fix up attractions and pretty much everything in the park. but it was such a small group of people that outsiders were kind of like waiting to break in, and I didn't know if I wanted to like wait for a long time for that to happen. And from not wanting to kind of wait, I started to think about, well, like, is this really what I want to do? Um, there was always this kind of in the background of like teaching art or teaching history. And a couple of years ago, in this kind of interim period, I was reflecting on going to museums all the time growing up. Both my parents worked for the school district in Chula Vista, so we were always going to like Balboa Park in San Diego. Our family trips were to like New York and Boston, and it was just museums all the time. And so I was thinking like, oh gosh, this is a place where like art and history and all these kinds of things can like come together, and you can still be creative and still be in a place that wants to like educate people. And so I started looking for museum studies programs in California, and that actually brought me back to Cal State Fullerton, since they're the only school in the area that's got a museum studies certificate program. So that's where I kind of got into this like curating and like exhibition design kind of mode of creative work that I've been doing for, I guess, just about almost 2 years. So it's 2 years since I've kind of gone back to school and then been able to kind of do this exhibition design and curation stuff, which was almost immediately like, oh, this is what I want to do. Like of all the other things, like I like doing the art shows, but sometimes I was always and many artists are this way too, where they're hypercritical of their stuff. And it became kind of like, oh, I'm punishing myself to do these little paintings. And I was like, oh, I don't know how much like I can keep doing that. But it was like first semester, 2019, I was like, this is it. This is where everything I like is all aligning in this kind of one museum universe. So that's how I got there.
That is fantastic. It's always great when the stars seem to align with the things that you love to do, and how you know that they can affect the world in a positive way. Mel and I have had this conversation about how we're the most critical of the things that we do to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think our
Yep.
team is so supportive that whether it's the people in this room or, our former co-hosts like Gavin Ottison, who used to host a podcast with us, we're all really supportive of each other, and we're always telling each other it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, good enough. And
Yeah.
I can't get past it. I don't know how other people do it, but one of these days I'll learn.
I know one of my advisors was always like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get done. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay.
Right.
Absolutely. So as far as, curating and putting these exhibits together, from what you've learned and, how you plan on continuing to do this, what would you say is one of the most difficult things when putting together an exhibit like this?
It is, I know, actually another advisor in the first semester back, she was like, it's a miracle that exhibitions actually happen. The most difficult part is every single part of it. It's like research can be fun, with the Sleepy Hollow show, going into kind of like the history of like the cultural adaptation was really fun, but then it becomes, in a way, it mirrored painting where you're like pouring over like brushstrokes or sketches, but now you're doing like font sizes and like, oh my gosh, is this too big? Like, are people going to be able to read this? Is it too small? Do colors make sense? Does the placement of objects make sense? There's not really any part of an exhibition that's easy. It's all stressful.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. How do you go about even beginning to contact somebody? Because I have to imagine that all the pieces that are in this exhibit are not yours. They're obviously, a lot of them can be on loan. And how does the process even begin to put feelers out for people that might have things themed to what you're trying to put together?
So Sleepy Hollow actually came out of a show that got canceled. I was doing for this, because this show was part of the Museum Studies certificate program. You go through the program, and at the very end, you do a show. And so I was actually trying to do a Mary Blair show. And there was just, and so I researched like local collectors and just reached out to them. But none of them had pieces that were going to be available for the time that I was supposed to do this show in 2020. So I was like, well, this show can't happen. I happen to have Sleepy Hollow stuff myself. And so when I was trying to think of like an idea to do after this Mary Blair show kind of fell to the wayside, I was just doing research on like anniversaries of things. I was like, oh, was Edgar Allan Poe born in 2020? Or like, did he publish The Raven? Like I was trying to find like a thing to do a show around. And that's when I came across, oh, Legend of Sleepy Hollow turns 200 in 2020. I was like, boom, that's it. I was like, because I already have some stuff. The show was supposed to be at Cal State Fullerton in a much smaller room. So I was like, oh, the stuff I have would fit like perfectly in this little space. For the artists, a lot of them I met doing like Sam Carter's shows. Like Hayden Evans, I met him at Popzilla. Marissa, I met at when Ava Lacey was doing kind of pop-up art shows too. So a lot of them are from that group of artists as well. A lot of objects actually came from, I put a newsletter out last year just kind of saying like, an Instagram post saying like, oh, I'm going to do this show in 2021. And this woman, Laura Holmes, just reached out to me and said, oh, I'm a local Orange County resident and I collect Sleepy Hollow stuff too. So that was kind of that serendipitous like thing. So she just reached out to me. She was just like, oh, she was funny. She was like, I have a little bit of stuff if you want to take a look. And I was like, okay. And she sends me like photos. Her house is like all Legend of Sleepy Hollow. She has like scrapbooks full of like ephemera, like and like stamps, all the political cartoons that are in the show, they're all from her. And so I was like,
Wow.
oh, thank you. So that was just kind of like a fortuitous circumstance that happened to get all that stuff.
Is the deck of cards hers?
No, that one is mine. I was like going on eBay and like buying some stuff for myself. Like as I started curating this, I was like, let me just see what Sleepy Hollow stuff is out there. So the deck of cards were mine.
I'm going to have to give you a virtual high five from here because I'm a card collector myself. I love playing cards. I love card magic. And I had recently purchased that deck, and Mel told me, it's in the show. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Did you find it? I found that on eBay.
I actually go through a dealer in Nevada. There's a lot of the custom playing card companies are out in Nevada, and it's like playingcardsomething.com. I'll send you the link if you're interested. But,
oh yeah, for sure.
I always buy the cards through there. But yes, eBay is, always full of different custom decks. I think at this point I own 3,600 decks or so.
Oh my gosh.
With different designs, and
I
love it. I'm kind of obsessed. It's horrible, actually. So as far as the Sleepy Hollow exhibit is concerned, I want people to go see it, but tell us about what you learned while putting it together, and what can you tell us is some of the coolest things that people will experience when they go see it?
I think so. What I learned was, and really what kind of, at the very beginning when I started to just kind of do research on it, what was this kind of revelatory moment was it's a extremely small passage in this History of Halloween book I have, in which the author is talking about the Disney film. And he says, oh, it was an anachronism that the Headless Horseman would have a flaming jack-o'-lantern and they'd be singing about Halloween. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, why is that an anachronism? And so it led me down this kind of like rabbit hole of research where it's like, oh, like Halloween wasn't a thing in the 1820s. So they wouldn't have, when the book was written, Washington Irving would have no idea what a jack-o'-lantern or Halloween even was. And I was like, oh, that's that interesting story then, is how the Headless Horseman and Legend of Sleepy Hollow become tied to Halloween, and kind of like all this history that goes into it, to something now that we don't even kind of think about. Like, I thought it was so interesting that all the artists did the Headless Horseman pretty much, and they all did, what we assume is the Headless Horseman kind of iconography, like the flaming jack-o'-lantern and stuff. But to sort of trace that history back to the original story to like now was really cool for me being like a history nerd.
That is awesome.
So I was just like, oh, because I don't know, it's something that you wouldn't even like kind of think about. And then you start getting into the history, and then like you start looking at the Smithsonian actually has a bunch of old paintings of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow that were done kind of in the 1830s, 1840s, of like the Headless Horseman is clearly like a person in like a robe with a hood on, and they're either holding like a head, like a real head, or they're holding just like a pumpkin. So this kind of like, oh, they wouldn't even have thought of like a jack-o'-lantern or making the Headless Horseman like supernatural. Like they didn't even see it that way. It was like so cool to me to see that change happen. And there's a piece in the show, it's kind of a small piece. It's in the group of like all the like tchotchke, like ephemera collectibles. It's a ceramic piece of the Headless Horseman on a horse. And it's taken directly from an 1830s illustration, but they chopped the head off. And the pumpkin in the illustration, they've made like a jack-o'-lantern. And I was like, oh, that's like, this is like the whole like story of the show is in this one piece where you have them take this, they took straight from an old picture, but then made it into our contemporary interpretation of the story. So that one kind of sticks out to me. But I think the one that everybody really gravitates to is the Sleepy Hollow dress that was done there, and that was another fortuitous circumstance. So the person who crafted it is Christine Millar, who is a historical costumer in St. Louis, and like in early August, she posted a photo on her Instagram of her in that dress, and I was like, oh my gosh. So the photograph that's on the wall in the exhibit is what she posted. And I asked her like, oh, can I use that photo? Like, this is beautiful. I love this. Can I use this in the show? And she was like, yes, of course. Do you also want the dress? And I was like,
oh, wow.
Yes, please. So she sent that to me. She made it all by hand. And what I love about that is that it's like the community love for this story. So it's not like a prop, or it's not something that was kind of like manufactured. It was like a fan that made this, and she spent all this time on it. And so I think to make that a fantastic like showpiece really like made it. And I tried to put it kind of like as soon as you walk in to the show, you like see it all lit up. So it acts kind of like a draw into it. So that, I think that's the piece that people really are like resonating with.
Wow. What a great story. I mean, I don't think people... I know people resonate with the story of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but I think it's so embedded in the culture of Halloween now, like you were talking about earlier, that, I mean, you can even visit Sleepy Hollow, like the location, and stay there, and, they tell you stories about Irving, and, it's gone so far that at DCA now, California Adventure, there is a Headless Horseman in the middle of Buena Vista Street as an homage to that original cartoon.
Yeah, I went to Disneyland the day after the show opened to like celebrate, and we went into California Adventure and saw that, and I was like, oh, I can't escape this guy. Like, he's everywhere. He's everywhere I go now. But what was really interesting was so the story is all fabricated. So Washington Irving made it all up. But I was recently watching a couple weeks ago this vlogger who lives in Sleepy Hollow. She was giving a tour, and she was like, "Oh, this is where the Van Tassels lived, and this is where Ichabod's schoolhouse was, and like this is the church where Ichabod was like taken away by the Headless Horseman." And I was like, "Oh, she's talking about this like it was a real thing." And that just kind of struck me, like what you said about how ingrained it becomes in the culture, where it's almost like it's a real thing that happened now.
Yeah. I think if you decide to continue the show or expand it, maybe move it somewhere else, we'll talk to our non-existent Disney contacts to get you the Headless Horseman from California Adventure, so you can include that in the show as well.
Yeah. I'd be like, yeah, I can get down the shuttle, right? Yeah, that will pass through security.
Right?
Just get me a rope. I got this, guys.
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
this. I'll put it on top of the car and hold on to it as we're going through the freeway. Mel and Larry, you've both seen the exhibit. Now that we have Clark here, are there any questions or any comments that you want to throw out there? I mean, we have Clark here to answer them directly now.
Ta-da!
Right? Oh, I love, first off, thank you for sharing these stories, because one of my questions was going to be about the dress, and I fell in love with it. Ooh, and I know I was like fangirling over it. It's because I love when someone takes that time to create something so beautiful. And I was telling everyone that you could see I don't know exactly what she used, but for the stripes, you could see it. And you could see how, like, every stroke and whatnot. And I think that was like one of my favorite pieces. My one question, because this blew my mind, was how did you find some of these awesome pop culture pieces like the Marvel comic book? I was like, what? I only know so much. I know very little of Marvel. But to see that, I would never have seen that comic book. Like, how did you find that?
That was very long eBay searches. So they,
Nice.
yeah, it was kind of like a roulette. So every time you go on eBay, sometimes there might be something amazing, and then sometimes there might just be a lot of nothing. And so with the show being kind of postponed a lot, it gave me time to kind of really search for things. And so when that one came up, I was like, oh gosh, I have to, because I started to see a lot of comic book adaptations. So there was like the Marvel one, and then there was the one with like the Dark Shadows, and I was like, oh man, that's crazy. And then there were some that didn't make it into the show for space that I got. So there was a series of monster variants, and so there was one with it was Starfire as the Headless Horseman, and that one was pretty cool. I just wanted to kind of show that I felt that Marvel one was so 70s. I was like, I have to keep this one in there, because I wanted to show too, throughout time how the Headless Horseman pops up in different things.
Yeah.
And I felt that there was a lot of other contemporary stuff, so I think I took the Starfire one out and put the Marvel one in. But like that Mad Magazine cover, that was Laura, so she had that.
Nice.
So it was one of those things. She goes, oh, I have this Mad Magazine. Would you want to use this? And I was like, yes, please.
Of course.
So a lot of them were just long hours of like searching online for stuff, seeing what people were posting. And then Laura too. Laura had a whole bunch of stuff.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of cool pieces in that show. Well done.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Clark, you nailed it. The dress, me and my wife were immediately the way when you walk into the room, it's just like a gravitational pull, because you're like, the Sleepy Hollow movie, that adaptation with Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci, I grew up in, like, that was like one of the biggest movies, and it's funny because I just went that way, but now you explain it is like in this chronological order, so it was like I went backwards, like the other way around, like going from there to going to the front side. So I kind of like did backwards time, and it meant so much more doing it in that way, because I felt so much more like of a connection, like you talk about. There's more to the story than what a movie is, right? Like you said, this is like something we fabricate into a realism of a story that like may have happened. I think for me, you nailed it. I was like, he's kind of mentioning, like when he's answering Melissa, if there's one thing you wish you could have had in the exhibit, are you able to say it now or list it out? Because I know you said you had some space constrictions, right?
Yeah, I think everything I really wanted got in. There was a couple, I'm trying to remember, I feel like there was a couple of cool pieces of toys from the Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow I wasn't able to get. But I was kind of like, that's okay, because I kind of felt like I didn't want to lean too heavily kind of like on products. I want to have a little bit, there's a little bit of that. There's some stuff that Laura had, like from Home Goods, that I wanted to kind of show that, oh, he's still kind of a relevant figure that's still being kind of produced in different ways. But I did want to, it's part of that kind of curatorial thing where you're like, oh, how much like toys do I want? Or how much kind of folk art do I want? And so because there was a kind of a really elaborate Christopher Walken that has this Horseman toy, but I was never to kind of get. It was always kind of like just out of my price range, and I was like, I'll pass. I was able to get one of the books is one of my favorite illustrators from like the classic age of illustration is Arthur Rackham, who does this kind of weird Art Nouveau style. And I was able to get an actual, because there's like reproductions of his illustration edition. But I was able to get like a real one, like from the 20s. And I was like, oh man, I was like, that's one of my favorite pieces in there. There was a really funny Headless Horseman crossing sign that Laura had that I had to sort of leave out for space. But that's when I kind of, and there was an M&M's magazine advertisement of the head of the Headless Horseman having M&M's while his body is outside, like terrorizing people. And I was like, but it was just kind of like, it was one of those things where like, it doesn't fit with anything.
Got it.
It doesn't fit with like the film adaptations. And then I was getting kind of like with room constraints. And so I was like, I have to say goodbye to this one. It's just, I was really sad, but that's probably one I was like, I wish maybe next time.
Yeah. Like we were talking about, maybe expand at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, if only you could have got that DCA statue, right?
From our non-existent Disney contact.
Yeah, that
you
would
just wheel it over. They make more than one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they have to.
Sure.
And you know, I'm up in NorCal, so I couldn't go see it. But from what I've seen, I really like that logo. That's the moon or the orange circle with the Headless Horseman that is on all the promotional stuff. Is that a piece that's in the show?
No. That was actually, so I reached out to Hayden Evans. I love his work so much. He has this balance of like, it's retro and nostalgic, but it's very contemporary. Like he doesn't kind of go into where it's just vintage. And so I was like, this is like the tone I want for this show, is to make it contemporary. And that was something that went through the whole thing with like the color choices and like fonts and kind of all this stuff, was I wanted hints of old timiness. I've seen shows like history shows, exhibitions that kind of like go a little bit too much into the old timey. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to make this like an old show, like, or like a, an antique show. And I felt his work straddled like vintage and contemporary. So I reached out to him to do that signature image that I put over like the announcement cards. The catalog is going to have that on the cover. But he also did his own piece for the show too, which was much more kind of like Wild West, which was really cool, kind of like 180 direction from the signature piece that he did. But I think he is planning on releasing that as like its own print. So I would be on the lookout for that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, I don't know if this is what happens at art shows, but is there merchandise for sale at the art show? Because that's what I would want to do, is buy the merchandise of the art show. Besides the stuff.
Yeah. There was. I worked in stores at Disneyland, so I channeled my inner Disney Stores cast member, and I was like, I want there to be merchandise for this show. So there is a tote bag that has that image on it. And then there was, it's sold out and I don't think it's coming back. We put the Legend 200 logo on a mug. And then we partnered with a local candle maker to make it like a mug candle. Those sold out pretty quickly, but I don't think she had enough time to like make more of them. But the tote bags are still there. Or we got another shipment of the tote bags. But I was like, yeah, I do want merch for this.
Yeah, that's cool. That's sweet.
We'll have to also work with our Spirit Halloween contacts because Andrew has been our Spirit Halloween contact for all things Halloween this year.
Yeah.
He finds all the goodies at the ones around his area. We go and we find nothing. But apparently everything we've never wanted, Andrew finds for us.
Oh, yeah.
I've only been into the Spirit by Me twice, the one in Anaheim Hills. And every time I go in, there's all these signs that says like more merchandise coming soon. And I'm like, it's like 3 weeks to Halloween Spirit. Like, come on. Like, the coming soon is now.
Shipping delays or something. I don't know. I haven't been to Spirit in like a week and a half, so I'm due for another trip to see if they have any more Haunted Mansion stuff that I haven't already bought.
That's awesome. I was gonna say Hayden Evans is another amazing talented artist. It's kind of cool that you got him to do that art piece. He's recently been posting a lot of art that looks similar to Rolly Crump's artistic style. And I swear, as I was going through Instagram, I remember scrolling past one of his pieces and thinking, oh, that's a Rolly piece I've never seen. And then I read the caption, and it was like his piece. I was like, stop, this is amazing. So that's awesome that he did that piece for the show. I love it.
Yeah, I'm very happy that all the artists not only said yes, but like stuck with it through, because they all said yes when I started asking them in 2019.
Wow.
And they all stuck with it through like all of the coronavirus shutdown and stuff. They were troopers for sure.
How many artists total do you have in the show?
Oh gosh, 15? Yeah.
That's amazing that they all stuck by and did the show. It's been a tough couple of years, but from what Mel and Larry have told me, they were singing the praises of the show even after the podcast. And I was telling my wife that I want to try to find some time to go because I don't want to miss it. I mean, from what they've described, it's one of those shows that is really well put together. It's really informative, and more importantly, it's entertaining. And I've been to shows that hit one or two maybe of those three key points, but when you can nail all three, you know you have a winner.
Yeah, I've been kind of blown away by like the response of people, because you never quite know, especially with something like when you do a painting and you put it on the wall and you're in a show with other people, you kind of have this like background that you're part of, so people can kind of pass over your work or whatever. But when it's like you're the curator for this whole space that you're in, it becomes like a whole different like nervous ball game. Like I was so like the night before opening, I was like, oh my god, everyone's gonna hate this. This is garbage. What am I doing? Everything's wrong. All the text is wrong. The pieces are stupid. Like I don't know. Like, but I think it's one of those things that every person kind of goes through. But I've just been really, really just kind of dumbstruck by the response to this. So I'm glad everybody likes it.
Well, you deserve all of the accolades that people have been throwing your way due to this show.
Yep.
And I mean, if this is a taste of, what you've been going to school for, and this is something that you're passionate about, I am eager to see what you're going to give the world next, because if this was something on a small scale, once you start giving us Disney archive level stuff, I think it's going to take it to the next level for people.
Oh, thank you. I was really happy too that the Hilbert Museum was able to loan the Mary Blair piece that's in the show too, because that was one where I was worried. I was like, oh, they're not going to want to loan their piece for this thing, but they did.
Is Is that concept painting? Is that a concept painting from the film? Is that what that is?
Yeah,
It's
one of Mary Blair's kind of color theory concept pieces for Sleepy Hollow.
Very cool.
Well, now you have that Mary Blair piece, and you intended on doing a Mary Blair art show before. So it seems like we have a path to the next show, Clark.
I was like, yes, there's one already here for the next one.
Exactly.
Right?
Put
There
some
you go.
other ones next to it. Yeah.
We got 1 foot in already.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, listeners, you hear it. If you've got a Mary Blair piece, or you know somebody that has a Mary Blair piece, get a hold of Clark because he wants it.
Yeah. My
Just to
address
borrow,
is...
just to borrow.
Yeah,
Right?
borrow.
Borrow. You'll definitely get the original back.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's your photocopy.
If it looks like a horrible photocopy, just ignore it. It's your original
Yeah,
piece.
no,
Line.
it's the
That's the
original.
original.
It's the frame, yeah. It's still in the frame. Yeah, it's definitely not a photocopy.
Well, Clark, tell everybody again where they can see the exhibit, when it runs until, times if you have them, and then how people can follow you so that they can stay in touch with when you put more of these shows together and they follow your art as well.
Oh yeah, so for following me, my Instagram is Art of Clark Silva. I will probably start to post. It's like personal and kind of exhibition now. You can kind of go through and see kind of the old art I used to do, but that's going to be where like new shows and stuff get posted. For Legend, it's at the Museum and Cultural Center in downtown Anaheim. It is open Wednesdays through Sundays, 11 to 5.
Fantastic. All of that information we're going to go ahead and post in the blog post for this episode. Make sure to head over to podketeers.com/382 if you're interested. A link to Museo will be there and also to Clark's Instagram. Any closing words from anyone before we wrap up this segment?
Everyone needs to see this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you got to go see it. Since, for anybody out there that want to be aspiring to be a curator or even just, history and art major, how many hours can you estimate that you put into this one exhibit? So then everyone that walks into this knows, the hard work you put into it. And on top of that, the ones that think of going for the future of chasing this, what it may look like for them.
Oh gosh, it's hard to say. So just putting it up, like building it, was 8 hours every day for, let's see, September, for almost a month and a half.
Wow.
And that was just putting it on the wall and stuff, getting things printed, making sure things were like proofread and all that stuff. Everything else, it's really been, there was times during kind of the shutdown where I wasn't working on it. But it's countless hours in the research, in the writing, I had completely designed a totally different like layout and like design kind of style. And then once the show shifted from Cal State Fullerton to Museo, it changed everything. So I almost had to work on the show like from the beginning again. So if I had spent like a total of like six months working on it, I was doing that 6 months again.
Wow.
Because everything got changed. And it all changed like when I wanted to make the text bilingual, that changed everything. Because I couldn't include and I felt like I wanted to be like, Anaheim has a large Spanish-speaking Hispanic population that loves Halloween, and I don't want to exclude them from this. Like, Halloween's for everybody.
Right.
But that meant going back and being like, okay, well, now I have to translate all this, and I have to make sure the Spanish makes sense. And then it's not fitting on the text panels, but the walls haven't changed. So now I have to cut information and all this stuff. So it was like, I would say I did this show twice. And there's no way, there's no way for me to reflect on all the hours. You just have to.
Somewhere between 5 and like 10,000 hours.
Yeah. Probably closer to the 10,000. Yeah.
Awesome.
Wow.
It shows,
2,999
just like Melissa
hours,
said.
yes.
Yeah, it shows absolutely. Like if you, I'm vouching for it 100%. I've been to other art things from the Bay Area and from to LA, and this one is awesome. It's definitely a gem. You need to check it out. Or should I say a pumpkin?
Well, Clark, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. We're glad that we had an opportunity to talk to you, learn a little bit about you, and learn more about the show. Again, anyone interested, the information will be in the blog post for this episode, podketeers.com/382, if you're interested. Clark, again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on here. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
Oh, man. What an awesome interview.
Yeah, Clark's fun. I like Clark. We need to go to Disneyland more with Clark, I think is
Yeah.
We'll steal that not steal. We won't steal the
We'll borrow.
Headless Horseman statue.
Borrow.
It. Yes.
Borrow. Like we mentioned, we'll take a piece of rope, we'll put it on top of the car, and we'll just hang on to it as
I
we're
think if
driving through the streets.
If we all rent an ECV, then we'll have enough we'll tie ropes to each one of them, and we'll be able to drag it out of the park. I think
Man,
that's
the joke's
Sure.
plan.
Going at like 5 miles
We'll
per
just
hour.
sneak it out, right? We'll,
Yeah, it's
we'll,
sneaky.
we'll
We're sneaky. We'll put
throw a
blanket
cloth
over
or
it
a
something.
jacket over it. Nobody will be
Yeah.
the wiser.
Oh, my baby's under there sleeping. Just ignore it.
Put it in the stroller.
Yeah, that's a big stroller.
Hey, they make some pretty big
love it.
Costco-sized
I love
stores
it.
now.
So we got. Oh, okay. So where do I want to start? I want to start first of all by saying thank you because we got a couple of comments on Instagram from the last episode. Where we were asking about the parks. We talked about the 50th anniversary of Epcot. I had been interacting with a couple of people on Instagram, including our buddy Jason, who lives on the East Coast, works at the Arribas Brothers. We're going to schedule some time to actually talk to him about his experience with how things went at Epcot for the celebration. So that's going to be coming up in an upcoming episode. But I did want to read a couple of comments. So the first one is from FGP Squad member Adriana. Remember that we asked in the last episode, when was the last time you purchased a photo, like a physical print? She said, I'm going to say the last time I had a picture printed from the park was 20 years ago. So that was back before the digital age, and the only way to get the memories was to buy a print. And it was of us on a roller coaster, of course, and I wonder if I can find it. So if she does find it, I hope she tags us. We'll be happy to repost it. Seems to be a common thread, right? I don't think a lot of people really purchase those photos because you're either carrying some kind of good camera, but with phones, I mean, phones have such a great camera that you don't really have to carry a bunch of stuff with you to get a really great memory from that day. And with cloud uploads, you kind of have an instant backup, right?
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking about it when we talked about it. I totally forgot. I got some photos from the parks, a couple years ago, but they were at the character dining. So Goofy's Kitchen and Plaza, the breakfast, the character dining, they have like a little photo op at the beginning before you go in, and you can buy the photos and all that stuff. And we ended up doing that. So for me, it's been, it wasn't in park photos, but it was on property photos that I got somewhat recently.
I mean, that counts, I think.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
But they come around to your table. It's kind of like medieval times. They come around to your table and show you the photo. Would you like to buy this? And then they include the digital print, the digital copy as well that you just add into your app. So best of both worlds.
Did you ever go to one of those places where they would offer you the photo package, and then they had that like little plastic cone looking thing with the lens, and you would look into it and you would see the picture inside of it?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh.
I don't even know what those are called.
Wow.
I'm gonna see if I can find a picture. If I can, I'll post it in the Instagram stories. But I remember those were big. Whenever we went to any type of event and they walked around, they were like, would you like to buy this insert name of kooky item here? And you just carried it on your keychain, and you could always look into it, and you remembered how goofy you looked in the picture.
It's kind of like those McDonald's toys. They had like you look up in there and it shows a picture of Mickey Mouse or whatever, but it's a picture
Yeah.
of you at medieval times or whatever. I can't think of any other place but medieval times. I don't know why. Medieval times or medieval times.
Says the guy who doesn't like turkey legs, and it's like
Or-
one of their top
Hey,
items.
I like turkey legs. I just don't like Disneyland turkey legs. Thank you very much.
Woo!
Ooh, them fighting words for real, right,
You
Mel?
know what? I don't know what to tell you. The turkey leg at Disneyland doesn't hit right with me. I don't know.
I think I know what it is. I will say that, I mean, I've kind of joked about it before, but the brine that they use at times is much saltier than others. I'm sure that they have some ratio that they have to use so that every single time they're the same, but they're not. They are different, which is why I've always thought that I could tell the difference between a Disneyland and a DCA turkey leg. People don't believe me, but I feel there's something different about them. But you're right. I've had at fairs, like local fairs where they do like deep fried everything, and then they have like turkey legs, and man, they just taste so much better. They got that smokiness to them, and they're like tender in a way that the ones at the parks just aren't. Like they don't feel like they're dried out as much, and I don't know. I get what you're saying.
I'm willing to give it another shot.
And I'll be there
give-
to pick up the turkey leg should you decide that you don't like it.
Yeah, I'll peel a little piece off and taste it. And if I hate it, that goes right to Hazen. There you go. Free snack.
Well, we're supposed to have that taste test or something like that.
Oh, we did say we were going to
Yeah.
do a taste test.
Yeah, we were supposed to do that, and that never
One
happened.
day.
So there you go. We got another person.
One day we will do it. Watch Andrew get them all right, and I'm like, I don't know, medieval times?
Oh, well, this one is from this cart, and this one is from this cart. This one's from Idlewise Snacks, and this one's from...
That'll be funny. Okay, so on that same post, we were talking about the new shows that came to Epcot as part of the 50th anniversary, and longtime listener Kristen said, spot on with the comments on the new Harmonious show at Epcot. I watched the live stream of it with high expectations and was very disappointed. I saw Illuminations a few times and loved it. Epcot is a great park, and I was really hoping this show would illuminate how wonderful it is, but that was a failure. There was no connection with the show. The pieces are too bulky, too distracting, the fireworks didn't seem well timed, and it just felt lacking. I like that they incorporated different languages with the songs, but I hate the stylized version of the songs. Keep it original. That's what people relate to more. The next time we make it to Epcot, I doubt we will watch the show. We'll take advantage of beating the crowd out of the park instead. Using the Gavin method. Using that time to sneak out or go ride something.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Ride Frozen
Yeah.
or something while it's the lines are shorter. Or Ratatouille whenever it doesn't have a virtual queue, if that's ever.
Yeah. So I
Jeez.
followed up with the question, as far as the 4 beacons of magic go, which one was her favorite? Because, Spaceship Earth was one, Cinderella Castle was the other, the Tree of Life was the third, and then Tower of Terror was the fourth. The way that they were illuminating them, they had all sorts of amazing projections on them. And she said, I have to say the castle at Magic Kingdom. Magic Kingdom to me is the most magical of the 4 parks. It encompasses fantasy, adventure, thrills, and basically everyone's childhood. The castle is one of the most iconic buildings, even though it's not a real castle in the world. Seeing the castle all lit up, all decorated out, goosebumps. It's the castle I grew up with.
There you go.
Aw.
And you look at the videos, you look at the photos that people were posting, and I mean, it looks amazing. Right, I have to agree that if you have the East Coast people that grew up going to Walt Disney World, you have West Coast people that grew up going to Disneyland, and if that's your castle, then whenever you see it lit up for whatever show they're doing, I get it. That's how I feel whenever I see Sleeping Beauty Castle lit up for fireworks or whatever show that they're doing here too. But I think as someone from the West Coast, having never been to Epcot or having been to Walt Disney World in general, like the castle, then this is me personally, right? Like the castle projection is kind of like, yeah, I've seen that. But Spaceship Earth lit up, like to me was like, whoa, hot damn.
Baby.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the one. That's the one.
That is the one.
It's I mean, I'm a technology guy, and Hazen's a technology guy, so it's
Sci-fi.
it's best of everything.
Yeah,
It's so cool.
yeah. But their castle,
Everybody's technology.
But their castle, though, I will say that it is the advantage of having a taller castle does really bring out the beauty and the brightness of a lot of those projections. So I can understand why she feels like that, and I can understand why people that love and get that feeling that she's talking about get it whenever they see Sleeping Beauty, whenever they see Cinderella Castle lit up like that. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? It's all gonna feel magical to me. I'm gonna cry seeing all of them. I'm gonna
You will.
be in the fetal position like any other time.
Wow.
So I get it. It's fine. I'm not crying. You are. Stop.
So if anybody out there, I always throw it out to the audience. If anybody out there wants to sponsor the Podketeers to go make Hazen cry at Walt Disney World, just let us know.
That's the GoFundMe
And
campaign. Make
the
Hazen cry
GoFundMe
at Walt
to-
Disney
Yes,
World.
it
to
is.
take Hazen so he can cry at Walt Disney World.
Such a
Ah,
sell.
that's funny. Okay, so thank you so much, Adriana and Kristen, for those comments. Remember that if you have any comments or you just want to join the conversation, you can do that on any of the posts on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. But we'd love for you to join our growing community over on Discord. You can head over to the blog post of this episode or podketeers.com. Scroll down, you'll see the Discord link there. Discord, for those unfamiliar, it's at its core, it's kind of like a chat program that allows us just to communicate with other people. We have different channels. We talk about Disney foods. We talk about different things in the park, attractions. We share our experiences, photos of things that we're doing in the parks, and sometimes we just have conversations about tacos because why not? That's just how life is. So again, Discord, you can find the invite on the website. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you out with that. Okay, so look. Muppets Haunted Mansion. Finally out. I'm super psyched. We gotta talk about this. But before we do, I do want to remind you that this episode of Podketeers is brought to you by a fantastic group of folks known as the FGP Squad. The FGP Squad helps us out with a monthly contribution via Patreon, and being part of the FGP Squad family gets you some additional perks like access to our monthly happy hour calls, access to additional content through Patreon, monthly giveaways, codes to get discounts on Podketeers gear, and more. If you want more information on how you can become part of the FGP Squad family, head on over to podketeers.com/FGP for more information. And of course, to all of the members of the FGP Squad, we just want to send a huge thank you for your continued support. Along the same lines, I also want to say thank you again. I know we've been saying it every episode since we started doing it, but I do want to say thank you to everyone that's also purchased a Podketeers Steamboat Willie pin. As you know, we've been selling the pins in order to help fundraise for Walk for Hope in an effort to contribute to ridding the world of women's cancers, because cancer sucks. And we are not doctors, we're not scientists, but we can help raise money to help those people do their job so we can just end the suffering or help end the suffering. If you purchase a Teamboat Willie pin, we will donate $5 from every pin sold. And if you are listening to this episode on launch week, I did get an email saying that every donation made to the Walk for Hope campaign by October 15th will essentially count for double, because one of the sponsors is doing a match for any donation up to $50,000. So
That's awesome.
I was planning on making the donation for the pins closer to the day that Walk for Hope was actually going to take place. I'm actually going to make a donation for everything that's been sold up until this point because I want it to count for double. And so if you want to make a donation, if you're listening to this on launch day, October 13th, 2021, and if you want to help contribute, remember that whatever you contribute will be matched by one of the sponsors of the event. So October 15th is the deadline for that. We're going to be making our donation by then as well. Any pins that you purchase, we will throw in the $5. As a matter of fact, look, I'll tell you what. I'll even add an extra buck so that we get even more donated. Any pins that are sold, I'll post this on Instagram before this episode launches as well. Any pin that's sold between October 11th and October 15th, when we make that donation, we'll donate $6 instead of $5, which will effectively make it a $12 donation through the match that's happening for the campaign. So
Nice.
we'll make a graphic, we'll throw it up on Instagram, we'll add a little bit more to the pot, and hopefully we'll get a really good donation going, and we'll be able to make a second donation before Walk for Hope happens. So if you have any questions about it, please feel free to reach out. Hit us up in our messages. We'll be happy to help you out. People are receiving their pins, and I have been touched as far as how much people appreciate them and have loved receiving the pins. Thank you so much for the feedback. I'm super excited because this, it's been a passion project, and the fact that we're able to tie it in with such a wonderful cause just means a lot to us. So thank you for the purchases. Again, any questions, feel free to reach out to us, or you can go to teamboatwillie.com for more information. And if just pins are not your thing, you can also just make a donation. The link to our Walk for Hope fundraising page for Teamboat Willie is on that page, teamboatwillie.com. Super simple to remember because it's just like Steamboat Willie, but without the S. .com. Oh, I shouldn't do that because that's copywritten. So .com. That's weird.
Wow.
I don't know. It's a .com. Just teamboatwillie.com. Just
That's like the used this in Hercules or something.
yeah.
Or like Mariah Carey or something. I don't know what that was. You know what? It's almost Christmas. You'll hear that Mariah Carey Christmas. It's coming soon.
Oh boy.
It's coming to you soon.
That and the drink guy, the soda guy, bubbly.
Oh,
That bubbly is coming.
Yeah, for sure. That's right.
Okay, back to what we were talking about. Muppets Haunted Mansion. Woo! Woo, 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 woo. Thoughts? Who wants to kick us off?
They gave us something awesome. I mean, this is redeems from what they gave us with the Muppets and Haunted Mansion in the previous years. So thank you, Disney. Thank you. This was amazing. 11 out of 10.
Ah, yes.
Nice. All right.
Yeah, really, it was really great that the Muppet Studio was able to stretch their legs on this one, and got all approved and everything happened. I really think it made up for the Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion. Not that it's bad. We talk about it and we give it a lot of but it was. I think it was the Mansion movie that people wanted. It got the tone right. It got the comedy right. For the Mansion, and you got to see the Mansion in all its glory, not the exterior, but the scenes take place in what looks like the Parks Haunted Mansion. The wallpaper was the same, but this was the same. Everything was similar or as close to or Muppetized as much as it could be. So it was, I loved it. It was great.
This was one when I started watching. I immediately knew there was no way I was gonna head to the exit if there was one in my my reaching. No, there is so much. Andrew, you nailed it on the head, and Melissa. There's like, if you have watched anything Muppets in the past, like Melissa's mentioned, there's always been ones that you kind of have like soft spots for, but didn't always hit on every cylinder. And then the thing you tie into, Andrew, is like, this is, if you liked Haunted Mansion, this is the movie that literally like just dug its feet into it and said, we're going full into everything Haunted Mansion you know of. But guess what? Like they've been saying, the Muppets are the major counterpart of this to give you that wholesome feeling. And for me, the jokes are so Muppet certified. I loved it. And Pepe, I've always had a soft spot for him, the prawn, and he's the main character in this. But I surprised by Gonzo. I mean, it's not that I don't know. For me, Gonzo's never been someone where Muppet that I'm like I gravitate to. I mean, obviously it's Kermit, right? That's like the major one. But Gonzo, I think was really placed well in this, and there's just so many Haunted Mansion references in it. And I'll say kudos to Will Arnett. I love Will Arnett and other things he's done. He really came through as being the ghost host in this, and so much like in his deep voice. I thought, oh, they might just make this corny too much, but no, I liked it. I like what they did with Will Arnett, and I think he paid homage to Haunted Mansion. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, Will Arnett wasn't playing himself. He was actually playing a role.
Right?
Because most things now,
That's a
it's
good
Will
point.
Arnett is Will Arnett.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Great points, Larry. I agree with all of you. I think this was not only a love letter to Muppets fans, but it was a love letter to the Haunted Mansion fandom as well. It hit on so many points that whenever you deal with a property that's so well loved like the Haunted Mansion, we're always going to criticize as fans because we want to see the things that we want to see that remind us of that property. And using Pirates of the Caribbean as an example, I think the reason that some of those pirate movies hit so well is not just because they're really well written, the action is great, but there was enough of the attraction that reminded you of it that you instantly connected and you felt like it was just bringing the attraction to life in a whole new way. The Eddie Murphy version of the Haunted Mansion, we've talked a lot about how a lot of people didn't like it. I have talked about how I started not liking it, but over time it's kind of grown on me. I understand where it kind of fits in the fandom. But it hit every single cylinder and more. Every reference that you could have expected in the mansion didn't feel forced. It all hit at the appropriate time. It felt like you were going through the attraction along with Gonzo as he was going on his journey. One of my favorite scenes is how they dump into the ballroom. Okay, how they kind of do the shot of going up to seeing them walk through that hallway and how they end up down there. Like, oh, that was so beautifully directed and beautifully shot. I had to watch it several times because I appreciated that shot so much. Everything about this screamed Muppets, and it didn't scream Muppets Now, it screamed Muppet Show to me. From the musical numbers to the way that they executed everything, this is what the Muppets were meant to be. This is how Disney should have been treating the Muppets for a while, and they haven't. Considering that this was their first official Halloween special, there's a part of me that doesn't want to see them reprise into another holiday special unless they can bring the same type of magic to it. I think this was a really perfect mix of something that we're used to seeing for Halloween with two properties that I don't know. I think, Larry, you hit it on the head, right? That Gonzo was the perfect character to lead us through this story. We're so used to seeing the Miss Piggies and the Kermits and sometimes Fozzie be the central part of the story. But the weirdness of what this particular special brought was so perfect for Gonzo and Pepe, or Pepper the shrimp, if you will. Was anybody else surprised at the fact that there was musical numbers?
Kind of.
It took me off,
but not too much.
Yeah, it took me off guard for like a second, but then I was like, "Oh, wait a minute! All Muppet movies have songs in it. What am I thinking? Why wouldn't it?"
Yeah, I felt the same way. There was a moment where I thought, "Oh, this is weird," and then it just felt familiar to me because of how they executed it. Now, I will say though that when they started announcing all of the roles of these people that were going to be guest stars, and I thought, oh, I know that person. Oh, yeah, no. And then Pat Sajak was announced. I thought, why is Pat Sajak in there? And I realized that they didn't have this huge role. Like, all they did was use them for particular scenes, like the singing bust, for instance, or I don't know. It was this really fantastic balance of how they monitored the stars that they actually used, and everyone else was just used as eye candy.
Yeah, and it's like Muppet movies, you typically have a lot of small cameos, and that's what this had. You had a couple of larger roles, Ghost Host, The Bride, and that's about it. And then everything else and then maybe a third is the groundskeeper, but everything else was tiny little bit parts in a song, bit part in a room, bit part into this. And I think they did the balance correctly. It was mostly Muppets, and that's what you want in a Muppet movie.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think I never thought about that. I've been watching a lot of Muppets, the recent iterations, and what I mean by that, the Muppet show that was on ABC, and then now they have like the Muppet, I guess it's like YouTube wannabe viral video they put on Disney Plus, and it does kind of get out of whack sometimes, where you just want the Muppets in it instead of the cameos. That's a good point, Andrew. Can't say any more to that. So, absolutely didn't see it.
Yeah, the way that everything was executed was perfect. I mean, to the even how they used Statler and Waldorf.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, I know we already started talking about it, but spoiler alert, having their Doom buggy stop in the middle of what was happening and you heard the breakdown spiel
That was funny.
awesome.
Yeah.
It was such an awesome Easter egg because so many of us are familiar with that happening that even including that just felt so familiar. It made this. I know I joked about it before even watching it, that this was going to be on my list of Halloween things and even on non-Halloween list of things that I watch all the time. This hit the pantheon of like my top 3 things for Halloween from now on.
Oh, wow.
It's so well made.
High praise.
So well made. I enjoyed it so much. I've seen it so many times since it started. I feel like I'm a little kid trying to learn the words.
Aw.
It's great. That song, the Life Hereafter, whatever it's called, that's just like, that song was fantastic. I don't know if everybody noticed like all the different little musical things in there too. There's like little bits of like Be Our Guest in there, kind of wording and stuff, and then towards the end you hear it builds like the Muppet Show theme, bum ba-dum ba-dum bum ba-dum ba-dum, and then it does the same kind of screen that the Muppet Show, the opening at the end where it's the arches, and then it goes out and there's more arches, and it goes out and there's more arches. They do that same thing in the ballroom with the 2 different levels, and it's going out and going out and going out. It's just, it mirrors that opening to the Muppet Show opening, and I thought that was hilarious, and it was great, an homage to themselves.
So good.
So good.
Love it. And the songs, they're very memorable. If you want to listen to them, you want to add them to your playlist. The 4 songs are available on Spotify now. If you're following us on Instagram, you'll see the story post. We're going to try to pin it because it's only up for 24 hours. But we'll try to pin it. Or if you just search Spotify, you can also go to the blog post for the episode. I'll try to put a link to the Spotify playlist there. And then you can just add the songs to your own playlist. But they're fantastic. Super Muppety. Super Haunted Mansion-y. Mel, you gave it 11 out of 10. I'm going for it. 27 out of 10.
Wow. Dang.
999 out of 10.
10. There you go.
And you know what? There were some scary parts too. Like, Old Man Gonzo is probably one of the scariest things I've seen. That was
creepy.
Pretty creepy. I mean, I think Old Man Gonzo was the creepiest, and then the second is Kermit dressed as Miss Piggy is the second creepiest thing.
Yeah,
I love that. I loved it.
By the way, when they first started talking about this special and we saw Kermit and Piggy dressed up as each other, there was a part of me that worried about seeing that scene and seeing that still image. And I mean, I was excited regardless, but I didn't know what to expect when they showed that. And I feel content in the way that they played that part of the story out, and that it wasn't just about them. And even Miss Piggy's role, like, she makes a reference to it when she's Madame Pigoda, you know, like, this is like my only part in this thing, and they confine me to a fishbowl or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's going back to what you said, Larry. Man, Gonzo was perfect for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I felt you talk about that, Andrew, that part when he's in the mirror and he's confronting. I don't want to spoil this for it because I think that's an amazing part of the real payoff is at the end of this special.
Well, here's the big
movie.
spoiler alert for everybody. Spoiler alert. Larry's going to say
There you
some
go.
stuff.
I'm not going to say what it's about.
He's not going to say the big payoff.
I'm not going to say the payoff.
But I do want to talk about that, though. So say what you're going to say, but I want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, if you want, I mean, for them to find a new story out of the Haunted Mansion, because I've heard so many different iterations of Haunted Mansion and what it could be and what it, you know, you're talking about what we just talked about, Mr. Gacy, you know, the Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy in it, and now you have this version of the Muppets. You're thinking, as you're watching it, it's a payoff and paying it to the Muppets, right? But then you get to this ending of self-reflection and understanding, like, what the Muppets always do is make you feel good about yourself and understanding, like, Muppets aren't always the winners. Like, me and Rebecca, my wife, were talking about this. They're not always the winners. Like, they're the people, as they're Muppets, that, like, they're trying to get the job, right? They're trying to be the actors. And to get this payoff of self-reflection, like, what are your fears to tie into Haunted Mansion, but also tie it to being, like, look inside yourself to find who you are, was just like, whoa. I didn't expect to feel this way, but this makes me feel good about watching the Muppets again. I just feel that warm feeling, you know, everything is great, everything is grand. Those like that came back in surprisingly a very spooky scene that was scary.
Yeah, that scene, I saw somebody's comment on a post talking about Muppet Haunted Mansion, and it said something along the lines of that scene in particular about where Gonzo is saying that, you know, his fear is that his friends will leave him out or what, and all that kind of stuff. They said it's kind of a double layered thing because the Gonzo's puppeteer Dave Goelz, he's the last original Muppet performer.
Oh, I didn't know
out
that.
of everybody, you know, he's the last one that is still performing with the group, and so it's kind of like a double thing there with him and Gonzo. He's the only one that's been doing he's the only Gonzo. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about with all these performers. And also there's a small cameo from Brian Henson, which is nice in the film as well.
Yeah. You know, Larry, you brought up a really interesting point about how it made you feel, and I would say that about 14 watches in, I felt like I started to understand why that was. And it's because it's not Disney. You know, I know that some people listening are saying, but it's on Disney Plus. Of course it's Disney. Here's what I mean. You described Jim Henson with what you just said right now, Larry. Jim Henson was a realist, but he was a really kind man. And, you know, his philosophy was always to make people happy with, you know, the Muppets, with putting on these shows and the messages that he brought around. Like, Rainbow Connection is the song that it is today because of the meaning behind it and how inclusive it is, you know, regardless of how you feel. The Muppets offer inclusivity in a way that a lot of other things don't. The reason I think a lot of us love Disney is because there's a certain level of wanting fairy tale endings to certain things in our life that it makes us happy, that almost everything we watch Disney related has a happy ending, and it reminds us that things can be better and that life doesn't always have to be grim, especially when you're in the bubble in the parks or when you're watching a film. They take you in a way that life doesn't always do for you, right? But the contrast with what Jim Henson made you feel and what something Disney makes you feel, this was clearly how Jim Henson wanted you to feel. That's why it connected so well as a Muppet production and not a Muppets Now Disney Plus produced Muppets thing.
Yeah, there
You
you
know,
go.
so
Yep.
I think that the more people watch this, what you and Andrew both talked about, I think is going to begin to hit a lot of other people if it hasn't already. I think it's a great point to bring up. But yeah, I mean, that's because I remember feeling it when I first started watching it. I couldn't describe it. And it wasn't because I'm a huge Haunted Mansion fan and because it was like, you know, I got to see this. And it was an inexplicable feeling inside of me that just made me feel like a child. It made me feel warm. It made me feel like like a warm pat on the back and a hug that said, it's going to be okay, buddy. Don't worry about it. You know?
Came through for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there you go. Muppets saving people. One Haunted Mansion special at a time.
Did anybody have a favorite quote? Because there was a bunch that were
there's
there
so
good.
many.
Yeah,
yeah.
there's so many.
That's a
I-
good
there's
question,
too many.
yeah, I laughed so hard at like I had to like stop for a second and when they go, oh, Miss Piggy goes, well, you try to rhyme with bat, and he goes hat, fat, rat,
Fat
hat,
rat,
and then there's
cat.
the fat rat with the hat.
The
and
fat rat with the
I
hat.
died.
Yes.
I could not handle it. So that was
Well, one of my favorites is right after. Well, you heard me quote the exact part right there, but one of my favorite parts is when the rat's there. He goes, "Tips are encouraged." Oh yeah, don't trust free cheese. That was very good. I thought that was awesome. Muppet comedy right there.
Right. I thought Pepe had a lot of like,
Killer lines.
yeah,
Just
he
one-off
did. Like, oh
zingers.
my gosh, his Spanglish, that was awesome.
Yeah,
Just
that's right.
the little things that he would say, and it's like, oh wait, he
Tina
like
had to
related,
explain
but it
one.
was hilarious, and the timing was awesome.
Tina had to explain one of his jokes to me because it just went way over my head or whatever. He said, horsey derves ASPCA or something. And I was like, what is he talking about? And I was like, she said it like 4 times, like, oh, I need to get to the hors d'oeuvres ASAP. I could not, for the life of me, understand what was going on.
Yeah, it's hard to choose because I think the entire show is replete with just quotable lines, but I guess one of my favorite parts, I guess it's a quote, has to be the scream in the stretching room by the goat.
Yeah.
The way that they brought the goat in and they implemented that scream was flawless. So, well, if you have any favorite parts from Muppets Haunted Mansion, we'd love to hear from you. Join the conversation over on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Just search for Podketeers. You can also join us over on Discord. As we mentioned earlier, the invite to join us will be in the blog post for this episode, podketeers.com/382. Or podketeers.com. Just scroll down. You'll see the invite for Discord there. We'd love for you to join our growing community there. You can share your favorite part, favorite quote. You know, let's just start a conversation on Muppets Haunted Mansion here because it is an instant classic. I don't think any of us disagree with that comment. And if anybody does disagree with us, we'd love to hear your point of view as well. You know, what didn't click with you? And what was it about it that you felt either wasn't Muppet or wasn't Haunted Mansion, and why you hate the production, if that's
You're
how you
trying
feel.
to start a fight, I think, is what you're trying to do.
Not at all.
I don't
Not at
know
all.
what's because that's
Here's
what's
what I've
going to
learned.
happen.
I mean, you never know. There are people that might not like it. And here's what I've learned. I've learned, especially in the last 5 years, let's say, that I've learned a lot about who I am and about the world by hearing contrasting opinions about everything. Having the ability to listen to how somebody feels about something has opened my eyes to learning new things. And I think there's a way for us to have those types of conversations regardless of the topic without fighting about it, by having an intelligent conversation, a calm conversation where people can give you their views and opinions and not feel like they're being attacked. sometimes those opinions come because they are misinformed, and sometimes they come because that's just who they are as a person. But it's always interesting to see how other people feel about things like that. And, maybe how I feel is fabricated because of, I don't know, who knows? But I'm never going to know that unless I hear a contrasting opinion.
Well, you're a more patient person than I am, I guess. I don't know, but good for you, and hope, you know what? I don't. Well, here's the thing. I don't think
Trolls
the person.
at Andrew.
I don't think the person. There's a person out there that listens to this show, I should say, that is not going to like Muppet Haunted Mansion. I don't think we have anything to worry about. I don't think a fight's going to happen. But prove me wrong, maybe. I don't know. Don't prove me wrong.
No,
I don't know.
I mean, I'm totally with you. If nobody leaves a contradicting comment, I'll be happy, right? But if it happens to come up, because I do think there's a difference between somebody sharing their opinion and being an absolute troll about something.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're going to be a troll and if you're just going to be a jerk about it, guess what? I'm going to block you. I'm not even going to condone that stuff because we're not here to condone the drama. We're not here to, feed your need to, feed your ego because whatever. We're here to have fun and we're here to have a conversation. And if nobody disagrees with us, then hey, nobody disagrees with us. We're all on the same page, and that's amazing. That's why we're here. We're here to share the magic. We're here to experience the magic. We're here to experience Muppets and Muppets Haunted Mansion.
Amen.
Hurry back.
Yes.
Hurry back. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Again, if you have any questions or comments about anything that we talked about in this episode, feel free to reach out to us, Podketeers, on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. You can also find us on Discord. FGP Squad, thank you so much for all of your support. Again, if you want to join the FGP Squad family, head over to podketeers.com/FGP for more information. Teamboat Willie pins are available. Remember that if you're listening to this on launch week, any pins purchased between October 11th and 15th, we will not only donate $5, we'll throw in an extra $1. On top of that, one of the sponsors of the event is going to be doing a match, so we're going to effectively be donating $12 per pin if you include that match. So our $6, the $6 from the match, it's awesome. I love it. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. Thank you to Clark Silva for joining us. Again, the information to Clark's Instagram and the exhibit are on the blog post, podketeers.com/382. Make sure to check it out. If you post any pictures or anything from going, please tag us. Please tag Clark. I'm sure that he would appreciate seeing that all of his hard work is as appreciated as we appreciate him, his art, and everything that he did to try to teach us a little bit about Sleepy Hollow and the Headless Horseman in this case. So that's it. It's going to wrap it up. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep moving forward, and always remember to pass on the magic. Have a fantastic week, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
Gee, no one says goodbye here. They just ghost you. Oh, I get it.
Nice.